two permanent employees, the caretaker who lived on the premises and the manager, a part-time position. As artistic director, Burrows had no salary, but worked on the same terms as the individual directors, 50% of the net profit of whatever production he directed, if it made any money. While the season brought in the majority of funds needed to run the theater, it had very little say in its operation, as the member groups each had a vote on the board of directors, and the season did not have a representative on the board. By 1991, 10 years after its establishment, the season had performed beyond its wildest imaginings. Economically, it was keeping the theater doors open, generating the vast majority of revenue for the theater through the following arrangement. Individual directors of the season worked on commission, 50% of the net profit. As producer, the Dundas got the other 50%, and the rent. In 1991, it marked a turning point for the season in two main respects. Without their realizing it at the time, a rift was making itself clear between the repertory and the center. The summer of 1991 saw two milestones: the reformulation of the Texaco Summer Workshop as a summer school at the Dundas Center. The repertory presenting We Took Three Bahamian Works to the Edinburgh Festival Fringe. The summer school marked the realization of a major dream for the Dundas, the institution of a structure to ensure training and exposure for young Bahamians. The participation in the Edinburgh Festival Fringe was evidence of the achievement and quality of the season. The Bahamas had been invited to attend by an American producer who took care of logistics. The summer school introduced a number of young players to the theater. The appearance at the Fringe gave Bahamian theater exposure. But the rift between the season and the center was not to be easily healed. The center had focused all its attention on the summer school, offering no financial or administrative support to the repertory to get the plays and the 30 players to the UK. The season had raised its own funds, beginning with a grant from the Quincentennial Commission under Winston Saunders, and conducting other fundraisers. By 1992, Burrows, who was unsalaried artistic director, again, had until that point shouldered the majority of the responsibilities for the season, choosing the plays, directing, overseeing guest directors, nurturing writers, reading and workshopping new scripts, overseeing the designing and building of sets, designing and running lights and sound, sometimes simultaneously, advertising the shows, designing and printing programs and tickets, and when necessary, designing and sourcing costumes and props. He went to the board with a proposal to create a management committee out of the people who consistently had offered him assistance over the years and thereby share the work. The Repertory Season Management Committee was established in time for the 1993 season and consisted of a group of individuals with responsibility for the following areas. And here they are. At the end of 1993, however, when launching the marketing for the 1994 season, the Management Committee discovered that the funds generated by the previous season had not been used to pay the season debts, and the previous season bills were still outstanding, but we had some nice new awnings at the Dundas. Burrows approached the board with an ultimatum: make the season autonomous or he would resign. The executive board established a bank account for the season with an overdraft facility to allow the mounting of the 1994 season, and the management committee was given leave to pay its own bills. The Dundas would remain the ultimate producer of the season. The only change in procedure was that the management committee, rather than turning over all receipts to the Dundas at the end of each production, would have the right to keep revenues until the close of the season, at which time the Dundas would get 50% of the net owed to them. The rent, however, was paid on an ongoing basis. The 1994 season was a financial success, with the season paying all its bills, wiping out the overdraft, and generating seed money to mount the 1995 season. The Dundas receives its 50% of the net profit when the season closed in May. The state of affairs benefited the season, but provided challenges for the Dundas. which had become accustomed to this monthly revenue stream. Although the Dundas was getting the season's rent on a monthly basis, the rental cost for internal productions was 70% of the rental for external productions. And members of the board began to reason that if the Dundas could rent to outside agencies, it would make more money on a recurring basis. This state of affairs was reflective of a larger reality. Theater in the Bahamas was changing, in large part due to the season and the creation of a paying theater-going audience. Professional theater was beginning to surface. The most notable pioneers in this regard were Michael Pintard and Therese Miss Daisy Davis. Theater had changed, the audience had changed, the market had changed. The Dundas was being administered in the same old fashion. Proposals were placed before the management and the board of the Dundas to modernize and professionalize the productions, including a proposal to computerize ticketing and a proposal to develop a comprehensive marketing plan. Both were ultimately rejected. A rift between the center and the season, which had become apparent in 1991, was growing. Finally, in 1997, Philip Burrows was offered a 2-year teaching position at the United World College of the Pacific in Victoria, Canada, and requested leave to go. His last season as artistic director for the repertory was the 1997 winter-spring season. He left the management committee in charge of the season. The board sought another artistic director and brought in Ian Poitier, a Bahamian graduate of Lambda, working full-time in the UK on a 2-year contract. Unlike Burrows, Poitier was offered a salary. Poitier's appointment did little to soothe over the tensions between the season and the board. Though Poitier was a former student, the members of the management committee, he did not appreciate the Bahamian theater culture, having been working in the UK where government subsidies were fundamental to theater. The Dundas had always resisted government funding and had built its season on private contributions and ticket sales. Moreover, the money from Poitier's salary was sourced from the Endowment for the Performing Arts, a body set up by Winston Saunders to ensure the continuation of the Dundas as a theater-producing space. Much of the seed money for the endowment had been raised by the season. The season was also responsible for Poitier's rent. In 1998 also marked the end of Winston Saunders' tenure as chairman of the board of the Dundas. He retired from the position in the spring of 1998, handing over the job to the former treasurer, Ronnie Knowles. Tensions between the artistic director and the management committee came to a head at the end of the 1998 winter-spring season, when, to protest the tight budget on which he had been placed by the management committee, Poitier appealed to the new board. The new board took the decision to dissolve and reconstitute the management committee. The board also resumed the responsibility for the season's finances. I won't go any further than that. The management committee requested a meeting with the board, at which point it tendered its collective resignation. Poitier closed out the season but decided not to return for a second year. The board engaged David Santos Donaldson, a Bahamian writer, actor, director working in the US, to be artistic director for 1999. Donaldson found himself in the position that Burrows had been in prior to 1993, a virtual one-man band, responsible for every aspect of productions, having to rely on volunteer assistance from the community. At the end of 1999, he too chose not to return. In 2000, therefore, the Dundas chose not to continue the season. Rather, it invested the money raised for it into much-needed infrastructural improvements with a view to raise revenue from rentals of its various spaces. In 2000, it engaged Ian Strawn to be administrator of the Dundas. By 2001, Ian Strawn had